Um, Not too much. I have been contemplating a theologically perplexing issue to some extent, and that is that, of course, it's very traumatic when Krishna leaves Vrindavan to go to Mathura and kill Kamsa in the Prakat Leela. But it's said, of course, that Krishna never leaves Vrindavan, and it's his Mathura expansions by his Prabhava Prakash that goes to Mathura. But his friends go with him. And as he enters into Mathura, of course, he's seen by all the devotees in Mathura who've heard about his exploits in Vrindavan, and they have a more regal and majestic perspective of him. So there's, Mathura Krishna. But meanwhile, his friends are with him, and they're all in Vrindavan Bhav. So the issue is, is Krishna in his half and half, or how is he being perceived and experienced by the cowherd boys? And how is he, while he's obviously being experienced differently by the inhabitants of Vrindavan, and if he's experienced in the Vrindavan perspective as from the cowherd boys, then it would seem he went outside of Vrindavan a little bit, not too far. So I've been thinking about that. It's an interesting subject. I haven't found any kind of commentaries on it, but at the moment I would think of it such that, well, the different bhavs are drawing differently upon him. And I guess while he remains in Vrindavan, he's also elsewhere at the same time, but that Vrindavan, in original sense of himself, is covered by the bhavas of Dwarka, for example, or Mathura, but they come out every now and then. Like in Dwarka, he dreams about the inhabitants of Vrindavan and calls out to them. That's not Dwarkesh Krishna that's doing that. That's Vrindavan Krishna that's doing that. So he seems to be in both places at the same time, invisibly in Vrindavan, and also invisibly in Mathura and Dwarka, where his original personality is covered by the bhav of the inhabitants. Anyway, that's what I'm preoccupied with for the last couple of days. Otherwise, everything's nice here at Audarya. And let's take the questions.
Okay, the first question is from Krishna Kanaya.
Hare Krishna, Haripur, pronounce.
Yeah.
So I have a question about the Bhagavad Gita. When I get to tell people about Bhagavad Gita, it's always curious that it's, it's a setting on the battlefield. And so this conversation hasn't happened yet, but I just want to be prepared when it comes. And also for myself, I want to know how to think about this. So maybe it's a bit weird, the question. So when I talk about the Gita and I say, okay, it's actually some kind of like holy war. I know also that this term holy war is like negatively associated with like, jihadis and just all these atrocities that are, committed in the name of God and, all of this. So the thing is that these like suicide bombers, they say like, oh yeah, God told me, to kill like all the the people who don't believe, right? So my question is that since actually Kurukshetra really also happened on this planet, and Krishna really did tell Arjuna to just kill the Kauravas, is it actually possible for Krishna to tell other people in this world to kill others? And I know it's like a weird question because, of course, I don't know about the relationship of other people that they have with Krishna. But I'm just trying to think of like of these people who say like, oh, yeah, God told me to kill these people. And I'm like, in an interreligious setting, what could I like respond, if anything at all? I don't know. Does it make kind of sense to you?
Yeah, it makes sense. Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I think that it requires a bit of a, theological discussion to bring the point truly home, in that Krishna is speaking with Arjuna. Arjuna is his unalloyed devotee. He's in Sakyarasa. He's in the Prakat Leela. Now, how do you explain that to all the people? I don't know, but just for the moment anyway, that is quite a different scene than somebody in everyday life says, God told me to kill, somebody else or start a war or something like that. The person Arjuna, you have to look at his character, how he's presented in the Gita, what was his well, if you look at his character, if you look up to the end of the 6th chapter, you should read my purport to the end of the last verse of the 6th chapter. All it means to be a devotee there, all he's gone through, now we're going into the second part of the Gita, the theology. So he's quite an extraordinary person, just from an ordinary point of view, from a religious point of view, and from a theological point of view, he's a parshada. He's an unalloyed devotee. So that's very different, first of all. And I guess you could put that in a general way. What's being described in the Gita as an intimate relationship between Bhagavan and his friend, fraternal love, where there's no material desire in the heart of Arjuna. So if we have material desire, then the likelihood that God's going to be interacting directly with us is, it's questionable, because our desires aren't in relation to him. So rather his agency, material nature is going to respond and speak to us and so forth. So, that's just one point. There's a difference between Arjuna and ordinary people. Somehow you would have to make that point, I think. And secondly, if you look at the Bhagavad Gita, like as a history, for example, in an actual battle, then you have to bring up the fact that the battle in the Gita is taking place at a certain part. The Bhagavad Gita is a part of the Mahabharata, and all that leads up to the battle is important. And what we find there is Krishna himself, Arjuna, the Pandavas, all on the side of Krishna, tried to negotiate. They exhausted all possible diplomatic measures to avoid such a catastrophic event. And even after all of that, it was apparent that the opposition, Kauravas, led by Duryodhana, would not listen to reason, and they wanted the war. They pushed the war. So Krishna's not pushing the war, just saying these people are bad, you should kill them. But he's trying to avoid it at all costs. And in the end, well, he sees that it's inevitable. And, there's a place for that in the world. We're not like the Jains with regard to ahimsa. We accept ahimsa, but we're not wearing masks everywhere to avoid breathing in insects. Our central focus is kirtan, not ahimsa. Ahimsa is part of it, but it's pragmatic, our sense of ahimsa. We're living in a world where there's kind of a war going on at all times on some level, right? So anyway, there was a huge diplomatic effort on the part of Krishna to avoid the war. And when it was unavoidable, given the nature of the opposition to the Pandavas, well, he had to acquiesce and say, then, well, there's a place now for righteously defending what's actually correct. So I think pacifism is faulty. Compassion as a worldview is said to be faulty also. Compassion is important, but as a worldview, at least in an overt sense, it's not, it's impractical. Mhm. So what I mean by that is there may be different ways to show compassion. Mhm. It said, you try to reason with someone. If you can't reason with them, well, then they have there's a saying, I guess it's in Latin, argumentum ad baculum, I think it is. Then you have to raise the rod of chastisement. Someone won't listen to reason. So there's a place for that. That's our perspective, to defend the devotees, to defend our guru, to speak up on behalf of Krishna. If Krishna is offended, if Krishna's devotees, if our guru is offended, we could become angry like Hanuman. He doesn't look very compassionate. He doesn't look very, non-violent. He set Lanka on fire with his tail, and wreaked havoc and so forth, all in a rage of passion, of defense of Ram against the atrocities of Ravana, which of course brings to mind the fact that the Gyan Marg is all about impartiality, and Bhakti is all about partiality. So and that would be the general perspective. Gyan really, as it's understood in Vedanta, most people will identify with that. Compassion, everybody's equal. And this equanimity is the basis of spiritual life. But then there is the positive side of attraction, affection for Krishna. Like we say, we don't advance in bhakti by detachment. That's not an anga of bhakti. It's a result of bhakti. And indeed, we advance by sangha, by attachment to Krishna. So these are peculiar ideas for most people because they transcend the basic sensibilities of what spiritual life really is about. And so to take them another step, well, it is not the easiest thing to do. But having said that, I think that Krishna's killing demons in the Bhagavatam. He's encouraging Arjuna to fight and defeat the Pandavas and so forth. But the result will be good for the Pandavas. So it is also a form of his compassion properly expressed, and it's humility also. The humility of it means to humility before God, to serve God's purpose, our Guru's purpose. So to stand up on behalf of Krishna or our Guru or the Vaishnavas, like Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur did, and criticized his own sect of Gaudiya Vaishnavism so strongly and whatnot. He was questioned, he brought the question, may not look like I'm humble here, but this is what humility means, not humility in an abstract sense, but humble before my gurus, my God, and that may means that I'm always going to do their bidding, and if someone misrepresents them, then I have something to say. So all this comes into play, and beyond that, of course, in such circles in which you're moving, it may be best not to play up the historical aspect of it and play up the metaphorical aspect of it, which is very present there. And that is that the battlefield is the battle is the ego battle, and Arjuna is being taught to slay his ego, and that's why in the second chapter, Krishna brings before him Dronacharya and Bhishma Dev, his art teacher in the military arts, his guru, and his grandfather who raised him like a father, and he told him, these are the people. And your identity, the teaching as Arjuna, is tied to your attachment to them. And so while it appears that you're slaying them, you're slaying your ego that arises out of identifying with this one as my grandfather, and so on and so forth. And so it's a battlefield in which every jiva is, as a sadhaka, is involved with. They have to slay their attachments. And that's really what the teaching is about. It's not meant to be taken like somebody like in American politics, Steve Bannon, like the Bhagavad Gita. He's like a total right-wing, wants a revolution kind of guy in the United States for Trumpian, perspectives and so forth. And he cited the Bhagavad Gita. So some of the Buddhists go, just see, Steve Bannon, he likes the Bhagavad Gita, Well, no, he doesn't understand the Bhagavad Gita at all. So it may be best to avoid, in those circles, looking at it from the battlefield itself, from a literal point of view, historical point of view, and look at it from an inner, teaching that is Krishna's providing, speaking to all of us. There's a battle of life, and the battle is with our attachments that distance us from our real self and our prospect to serve our nature as service of God, and which is where our fulfillment in life really lies. And so spiritual practice is a battle, and the identity that rises out of our attachments that has to be slain if our real identity is to come out. I mean, that's a very easy sell, if you will. So aside from what I said earlier, I would probably go forward with that kind of metaphorical perspective. And if someone would come back and press on it, then I would give the other answers and say, well, this is a different setting than your average guy wakes up and decides to kill his family because God told him to, right? Yeah. Does that help?
Oh, wow. Yes. Thank you so much, Hare Krishna. Wow.
Yeah. Okay, another question.
Okay, the next question is from Jai Sri Vrinda Devidasi from North Carolina. She says, I feel like it's not super deep, but why does Vishnu, the question is not super deep, but why does Vishnu only appear to Dhruva Maharaj once? I'm a bit disheartened with how difficult it is, even for pure devotees, to see the Lord. Maybe I don't enjoy hard work, exclamation mark.
Well, we see a similar instance in the life of Narada, as he himself describes it, or gives an overview of it to Vyas. Is it Vyas he's speaking to? I think. Narada, to someone, I forget, in the Bhagavatam, in the 5th chapter of the 1st canto, Narada tells his story. Narada Muni. He, of course, his mother dies. He's living at home, and his mother hosts some sadhus who, during the rainy season, he learns things from them. They move on after the rainy season, and his mother dies from a snake bite. And so he burns the whole house down. That's the funeral pyre, and takes to heart the teachings of the sadhus that nothing in this world is permanent, and so on and so forth. And thus he becomes a wandering mendicant. He takes residence in the forest, and following the Bhakti Vedantas, as Prabhupada described in sages' instructions that he received during the rainy season at home, he reaches a high stage in Bhakti where he gets the darshan of Krishna, and then Krishna disappears. And Krishna tells him at that point, I disappeared. I appeared to show you that I'm here, that I'm real. I'm not just an imagination. And I've disappeared to intensify your bhajan, because when you have something very valuable, you know how valuable it is when you lose it. You might have it and it's valuable, but not think about it all the time. But if you lose it, oh gosh, you can't stop thinking about it, right? And so that intensifies the bhajan. That separation makes the heart grow fonder, and it enabled, it gave Narada the impetus, the strength, the power to go the distance in his sadhana to perfect himself, to live eternally in the association of Krishna. So Krishna may appear briefly in the life of Dhruva, he appeared, but that is a similar thing happened. Dhruva went the distance from there, and he attained his perfection. So I think that it's more to be understood as a blessing of Krishna to appear in the life of a sadhaka, rather than a problem that he doesn't appear enough or whatnot. I mean, we know it's rare to attain prem. We know that we'll attain prem, though, because we've adopted the means. It's rare because only by these means can prem be attained. Other things can be attained spiritually, and spiritual attainments by other methods. But if you want prem, then this is the method. Braj prem, this is the method, as articulated by our Goswamis and demonstrated in the life of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So you'll get it, but it's not a cheap thing. So yes, you should not be afraid of hard work. Sadhana is a little hard at times, but it depends how we situate ourselves. If we situate ourselves in a way that's favorable for bhakti, by association, where we live, what kind of work we do, and everything becomes centered around our sadhana, then when we see that's what I am, I'm a sadhaka, this is what my life's about, let me organize my life accordingly. Like, as we would, I'm a mother, let me organize my life accordingly. I'm a student, let me organize my life accordingly. I'm, work in this firm, let me organize my life accordingly. So you have to do it around your sadhana. And then when you've done that and taken the steps to create a favorable environment, then it's not so hard to do sadhana bhakti. The environment is conducive and serves as a favorable wind, if you will. To be a sadhaka itself is a wonderful thing, very virtuous and rewarding lifestyle. And it will culminate in being a siddha at all times. In the course of our sadhaka life, our life of spiritual practice, Krishna shows himself here, there. You get a shadow of bhava, the chai abhas, shadow of bhava, and our hairs stand on end. We weep uncontrollably. And then the next day the tears have evaporated. Well, those experiences, they are a blessing, a taste of what's to come, and they probably serve as greater impetus than anything else for our practice. So if just Krishna should appear as he does in the life of Dhruva, how much that must have served as a positive impetus for what he was doing, for his practice. We can't imagine. We may be convinced by good association, examples of others, by philosophy, reasoning, that this is the right course and so forth. But if we get some experience, direct experience, that is the ultimate praman or evidence. Yet pratyakshavagamam dhammam susukam kartam, Krishna says in the Gita. That is the ultimate praman, right? Directly perceiving. So I wouldn't look at that as a negative. But Krishna appeared once in the life of Dhruva. If he would appear once in your life to you, I don't think you would think it was a negative either. That he hasn't yet, well, I wouldn't fault Krishna for that, but I'd fault myself for admittedly, as you have said, of being a little shy of working hard. And you have to work hard for this. But work hard to create a favorable environment for yourself by identifying yourself, as I say, as a sadhaka first and foremost. That's what I am. I'm a servant of my guru and Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and this is my ideal to attain Braj Bhakti. Let me organize my life around that and not care for whatever else may come our way. And what that may cost us relationships with friends, relatives, possibly We may have to have less income, live in a simpler life, and so forth. But we may find that's nice. Go to Mayapur, move to Mayapur. Prabhupada wanted, I've been thinking about this lately, Prabhupada wanted to create a whole city in Mayapur, right? Where all of his devotees could come, people from all over the world would come and live in Mayapur and make their lives simple for practicing Krishna consciousness. And he's done that. I mean, I'm not a member of ISKCON, I can't go and live there, but what Prabhupada has done there has overflowed throughout, Mayapur, outside of the walls there of ISKCON. I mean, I wouldn't be allowed to come in and give a class. I'm sure I could walk in there. Any of my disciples could walk in. You don't need to show a card at the door that you're a member of ISKCON. But aside from the walls of the property, if you will, of ISKCON itself, the whole of Mayapur has been populated with devotees from around the world. So I've been thinking about what a great place to live. And that's what Prabhupada wanted. So he's created the facility even for fools like myself, who have been excommunicated from ISKCON. I can live in Mayapur. It's a very attractive idea. I mean, all your economic problems would be solved. A few $100s a month, you would live, very easily, very easy to grow. You can even grow grains there. Even in Madhavan, we can't grow grains. We grow rice there and beans, but there, it's the rice field. It's very beautiful. Anyway, move to Mayapur. What? How could I do that? Well, it might be easier than you think. It's a radical idea in a sense, but it's quite reasonable if you're a sadhak. What about my kid? Well, a lot of kids over there too, and there's schools and I mean, there's plenty of ordinary people, if you will, or non-devotees who decide to join the Peace Corps and move to Africa, and have kids there, and they grew up in a different environment and they become special when they're grown up because they've had such diverse experiences and so forth. Or Christian missionaries going to other countries, and so I just thought, just an example, I guess I want to say, create a favorable environment for yourself, and then think, hey, Prabhupada created a favorable environment. It's easy. I can go there. That might be something to consider. So I hope that helps, and I hope Krishna appears in your life once. I think you'll feel it's a very positive experience when he does that, and I'm sure he will. You have my blessings and assurance. Just stay the course. Keep good association. Bhagavan Shri Krishna ki jai, Dhruva Maharaj ki jai, Mayapur Dham ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai. What else? Another question? I hope that helps. If you have any further comments, feel free to share them.
Was there a follow-up question from Jaya Rinda Devi? She raised a hand. Oh, I guess not. Okay. So the next question is from Sajan.
Dandavats Maharaj.
Haribol.
I did have a particular question.
Hari is the answer.
Hari, okay, Hari.
If I say Haribol, you say Hari.
Hari.
Okay.
All right, thank you. I had a particular question which I would like to ask, but just kind of like something came to me as a kind of like a follow-up to this what you just so beautifully responded to in terms of seeing Krishna. Was it Srila Prabhupada who said, do not try to see Krishna, but behave in such a way that he would want to see you? Was that Srila Prabhupada who said that?
Yes, very nice statement. Right.
Yeah.
Don't try to see Krishna, but act in such a way that Krishna will want to see you.
Right.
Someone asked me once years ago, have you seen Krishna? I said, I don't know, I wasn't looking. Maybe he was there, but I'm looking for how to serve him. And of course, that's where he is, right? With that, in that serving ego, serving disposition.
Jai. And then
Guru Maharaj used to say that if you see Krishna in the bhajan and he asks you to do something, you tell him to wait. Go back and ask your guru and say, this guy, he said he was Krishna, and this is what he wanted. Is that You think it was him?
Ah, that's right. I remember that. Yes.
Yes, that's so service to Guru. That's where we'll find Krishna. Right?
Yes, yes, indeed. Speaking of Guru Maharaj quotes, was he the one who said that the repetition of experience does not constitute realization?
Say it again.
The repetition of experience does not constitute realization.
I'm not sure what he means by experience. And of course, English wasn't his first language, so it would be, I'd have to look at that repetition of experience.
Well, I was curious if you knew exactly who said that. I think I recall that it was Srila Guru Maharaj, but I'm not 100% certain about that.
Yeah, I don't remember him saying that. I never heard that before, but he may have. And I'd have to know, what was meant by experience, because if you have a repetition of experience of, deep spiritual experience, it does culminate or drive one towards, realization. Anyway, so hard to answer that without knowing what the context is.
Yeah, I think it might have had something to do with like the more rounds that are chanted quantitatively, that does not equal, or does not bring about qualitative understanding or realization. I think it had something to do with the quantity of chanting rounds or something to that effect. Perhaps.
Yeah, that's an obvious and good point. But like I say, that's why the word experience, maybe it was another word, doesn't quite fit in, but just the repetition of practice unto itself. And that, for example, counting is not chanting,
Right.
Not count, don't count, chant. So not to get it over with, but to meet Krishna, but to serve Krishna, please Krishna. Right.
Yes.
If we're thinking I got to get it over with, well then, better you do some other service and mix it up a little bit so that you're on point here. I'm trying to please Krishna. Anyway, thank you for your question.
Yeah. Well, the original question I had before those kind of little follow-up things was I read in the Brahma Vaivarta Purana that Srimati Radharani and her brother Sridham cursed each other. So you're familiar with that?
Yeah.
Do you have any? I mean, I wasn't. That didn't kind of really settle well within me when I read that. I was wondering if you had anything to say about that.
I never read that section. I've heard it cited. And they took birth as, what is it, the Shalagram?
On Earth.
As Shalagram and Tulsi or something. It's connected to that. I forget. But my only response to that has always been that this is something from the Brahma Vaivarta Purana. Our book is the Bhagavatam. We look at everything that's said in other Puranas in relation to the Bhagavatam and accept it or dismiss it accordingly. So that story, other things from the Brahma Vaivarta Purana may be cited by our Goswamis and so forth. And those statements of that Purana that are cited are in concert with the Siddhanta given in the Bhagavatam. Those stories and statements that are not cited, well, there's a reason for that. So these Puranas speak in different ways to different persons at different times and circumstances and so forth. And the Bhagavatam has its particular focus, and that's the focus we're interested in. So that's how I always looked at it. I pretty much don't entertain that story. And it appears that it wasn't very pleasing to the ears of the Goswamis either. So you're okay on that.
Jai. Thank you, Maharaj.
Sridham Sakha ki jai, Radharani ki jai. What else?
I think Omkar, did you have a question?
Well, I just wanted to know if Guru Maharaj is still worshipping Giriraj, and I
Oh,
got
I'm
the
sorry.
answer from.
Sorry, I mixed that up. I thought it was another question. Okay, so in that case, the next question comes from the jungles of Madhuban. It's going to be Kishore.
Okay. Voice from the jungle.
Pranams, Guru Maharaj. Good morning.
Morning. Haribo.
Howdy. So I've been reflecting a bit on the terms Saragrahi and Barabahi Vaishnav. So my first question is where exactly, because I understood that Bhakti Vinod talks about that. So I was wondering where he talks about it. And then in relation to it, I've kind of understood that Saragrahi means essence seeker. Barabahi means someone who gets stuck in kind of traditions or rules, weighed down with that. And one thing I was thinking about was, it seems like the latter is not as common these days, but one thing that's almost more common is people, they often get stuck in kind of modern progressive paradigms, and almost can't see bhakti unless it fits into that. I remember I was on certain Facebook groups and stuff, like the Progressive Vaishnavas group. I often saw a lot of that type of comments. And so I was just wondering if you kind of see that being more applied to the idea of Saragrahi, Barabahi, Vaishnav, maybe in our modern day.
Okay, thank you for the question. The term Saragrahi is one that seems to have been coined by Bhaktivinoda Thakur. He mentions that I think there may even be a poem called Saragrahi Vaishnav where it's mentioned, but he does bring out the concept in his writing, either in Chaitanya Shikshamrita or Jaiva Dharma. And he's speaking about the basic idea that there is, in my terminology, a mystical or spiritual experiential orientation and a religious orientation to the tradition. The religious orientation is meant to take us to an experiential and mystical orientation, but sometimes we get waylaid there and caught up with the details of a particular religious sect, its markings, its practices, and so forth. And then other religious sect has different ones, and we become at odds with them, whereas the mystics in the two different sects are not at odds. On the same level, they may have disagreements about the nature of transcendence, but they're not fighting with one another and so forth. So in the time of Bhakti Vinod, it's a very interesting. It's interesting to note that if you look at Gaudiya Vaishnavism, you will see that at a certain point, the Goswamis, for example, in the Parshads of Mahaprabhu, Nityananda Prabhu, Advaita, and so forth, that their lineages were handed over largely to householder Brahmin Vaishnavas. Within the Varnashram, the Brahmins do the work of the religious work, worshiping the deities, serving as spiritual advisors, gurus, and so forth, right, within Varnashram. So that was a whole, Varnashram setting. And so typically, the Brahmin who became followers of the Goswamis became the likely candidates to be the gurus of those lineages. And there you find the possibility of a breakdown in that the Goswamis themselves, Nityananda Prabhu, Advaita, Gadadhar, Srivas, so and so forth. These are super extraordinary eternal associates, incarnations, of God, and so forth. And the highest kind of guru that you could possibly have, in a sense. So it has to come down a little bit from there to go forward, if you're drawing on people from this world, which they were. And so we see that over time, it's not uncommon that the spiritual power or strength of the lineage becomes weakened. It's understandable. Krishna mentions it in the Gita that over the course of time, there may be a need to revitalize the Guru Parampara, which I institute. So I give new energy to it. So we have that precedent there in the Gita. So we see that in Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's mission. But what's happening when you go from the Goswamis to the Goswami families? Now, we sometimes may criticize the Jati Gosai, which means the family Goswamis, because Goswami, is a title that pertains to someone who's not a family person in the ultimate sense, detached, sense controlled, and the Rupa and Sanatan, they weren't, married people with families and so forth. But it's also true that one doesn't have to be a renunciate. One could be a family person and be a great mystic, and most, if not, many, if not most of Mahaprabhu's associates were also family people. So that's there. But just to attach yourself with, to change your name to family name to Goswami doesn't mean you become a Goswami. Now, there's another way to look at that, which is kind of charming, in that they were followers of the Goswamis, and so they changed their family name to Goswami, Rupa Goswami. So it's not the Goswami, so Jiva Goswami. So we're the Goswami families coming from Jiva Goswami or Gopal Bhatta Goswami. That has some charm to it. But these persons, these Brahmin Jati Gosais, they very much formed a system. They systematized, they managed, they organized in ways that mystics like the Goswamis, for example, Sanatana Goswami, Gopal Bhatta, they wrote Hari Bhakti Vilas. It gives some detail, but other than that, the books are not about all kinds of details with regard to religious life, procedures, how to marry, how to have beget children, how to get initiated, and so on and so forth. So these Goswamis, they came to kind of fill in these second level, if you will, fill in, give some form, further form and shape to what Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was about, what the Goswamis were writing about, and so forth. So they systematized things, and then over time, by the time of Bhakti Vinod, you find, well, if you didn't have the Diksha Patra, or like take Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur, well, he was initiated by Gaur Kishore Das Babaji. So those kind of persons were rare, whereas the Goswamis families, there were many of them, and they were the main initiators. But to find a Gaur Kishore or Jagannath Das Babaji, that's another thing, right? And they were above and beyond whatever systems were created by the Goswamis, the Goswami families, and so forth, which weren't bad, they were good, but they were beyond that. So sometimes people criticize Bhakti Siddhanta after his departure, of course, and say, he didn't get a Diksha Patra. Where's his letter, from Gaur Kishore Das Babaji that he was initiated? What tilak does he wear? Because each party bar, has this particular tilak, and there was a system for giving the tilak and giving the letter and other details, right? So you hear these arguments sometimes against Bhakti Siddhanta, and they're all Bharabaki arguments. If you want to complain about Bhakti Siddhanta, complain to Bhakti Gaur Kishore. He's the one who gave him initiation. He's the one, that in whose presence, along with Bhakti Vinod, Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur, with their blessings, was initiating. He initiated his first disciples in their presence with their blessings. So, Gorka Shore was a rather unorthodox person. Wouldn't surprise me if he didn't have T-lock on or had it on backwards, I mean, he was a very unorthodox fellow. So for him to have to conform to such details, this is then a form over substance argument that doesn't go too far. So Bhakti Vinod was experiencing a lot of this, right? And claims to spirituality based on details and so forth. And so, he came up with this term, Saragrahi Vaishnav. And you say that, these things don't seem so relevant, but actually they're still relevant today. You still hear these arguments about Gaudiya Math or ISKCON, what kind of T-lock they're wearing, how do Bhakti Siddhanta, he wasn't initiated because these are the reasons, and the reasons are just ridiculous, So they're still about in many devotees' minds, and I find it too. I mean, I have experience of different moths and different missions, and you can be criticized in one mission for having the wrong color bead bag, as if you did it wrong, and this is a problem. You're not going to go back to Godhead unless you get the right color bead bag, or the right color, even one Gaudiya Math, and the right color saffron had to be the color of a cow's tongue, otherwise I guess it wasn't bona fide. So these things do continue to show up. And at the same time, these type of details, they need not be dismissed, and they're valuable if they're properly understood. That in our tradition, our Guru Maharaj has to do it like this. There may be other ways to do it because it's a detail, but we do it like this because he's given or she's given this detail, and that's good for us. And that's where how Krishna consciousness come to us in our party bar. So we go with that. Even though we may know the relativity of it, we see that its purpose and how it serves us and so on. But not to get that the basic idea, not that the detail be misconstrued for the principle. That's basically what he's talking about as Saragrahi Vaishnava. Now, with regard to your question about the modern world, we see in our time such access to everything, for example, through the internet. So people are much more politically plugged in than they ever were, and I want to say not politically only, but socially there's a network, right? And so all types of perspectives are out there and speaking loudly. And the Gaudiya Vaishnava doesn't necessarily have the microphone. In my times, Prabhupada had the microphone for us, and I didn't even know who was president sometimes of the United States. So you can't avoid that. You know who won the Super Bowl. If you're not even trying. Practically, you just turn on the internet, and there's some news about what which is an insignificant event in one sense. What to speak of who's the president, and it didn't matter. And people will tell you it doesn't matter. Democrats, in the United States, it's all the same, And there's some truth to that, and there's some problems with that too. So anyway, people are being bombarded with all types of social perspectives. You mentioned, Gaudiya, Vaishnav, progressive. I've seen that site. I don't think it's Gaudiya Vaishnav, and I don't think it's progressive, either one, from the strict definition of each of those terms. So Gaudiya Vaishnavas might be appalled by it, and progressives might be as well. Although they, that the persons on there seem to embrace what's called progressive social and political perspectives. Now, I should mention to you that there are as many people or more Gaudiya Vaishnavas who accept the opposite and conservative political and social perspectives. Maybe they don't have a site, Gaudiya conservatism or something like that, whatever, but they're out there. There's lots of them. So it's just, you know, I don't know if I would tie it necessarily to the terms that, the term that you ask about, Saragrahi, but I would consider it that just the ingress of worldliness into their lives that gets the upper hand over what it means to be a sadhaka. We have to make our determination. Some will be conservative, some will be progressive, some will be in between, some will be I don't care. You know, based on our worldview, that has to be the center. And I find that both on the conservative side and on the progressive side or the liberal side, there's a considerable ingress into many sadhakas' lives where that rules over their sadhana to determine something about their practice or about what they think the goal should be, what it means to be a devotee, and so on and so forth, which may be quite different than certain modern sensibilities dictate or speak to people about what it means to be a good, you know, a good person, whatever. So yeah, it's we need strong sadhu sangha to keep on course and keep the goal in mind, which is very clear. And, you know, you have some sense that, well, you know, what we're doing and what the goal is, it's been around for quite a long time, and the world's going to change in so many ways. Right? There's so many ways and so many different perspectives socially. You know, it will go backwards, it will go forwards, it will go in a good direction, it will go in a bad direction, relatively speaking, so on and so forth. So you really have to take these things with a grain of salt and let them rule over and determine and start to dictate what it means to be a sadhaka, and what the sadhya is as well. Prabhupada considered himself a very liberal person. He was surprised to hear people say he was conservative. By modern perspective, he might have been a conservative, but his own position coming out of Calcutta, he was a flaming liberal. Even his own godbrothers thought this guy's like, you know, he's got women dancing in the temple, you know, with the boys and girls dancing together in the temple. So anyway, I just I don't know if I would necessarily tie it to that, but there is, as much as Bharabhahi means to have a what Bhaktivinoda speaks about there, the Bharabhahi, he gives an example of I think maybe a mule that's carrying a heavy burden to get grass without realizing the grass is free on the side of the road. You don't have to carry that heavy burden. So to carry a heavy burden of dogma, if you will, that gets in the way of progress and the taste that comes from just embracing the essential practices, something like that. But you can look up the term in Jaiva Dharma or Chaitanya Shikshamrita and find a little more about it there. So hope that helps.
There's a follow-up question from Krishna Kanaya in regards to the Goswami family name topic. She says, is there a turning point when the divine Varnashram system, quote unquote, became the modern caste system? Or was it a gradual degenerative process over time? It was there before the British, right? Thank you.
Yeah, I would say that, you know, there's a certain concept of the Varnashram that's given in the Bhagavatam that is that the caste system is in conflict with. So it would seem that was a gradual erosion of proper understanding of what's given in the Bhagavatam. So, you can find example that there were persons in Bhaktisiddhanta's time, Bhaktivinoda's time, that felt that being a Brahmin was superior to being a Vaishnav, where the Bhagavatam teaches just the opposite, that whereas Varnashram fall in relation to bhakti. So yeah, I don't think it happened all at once. So it happened gradually, of course, Bhaktivinoda Thakur was there during the time of the British. That's towards the end. I think the British ruled over India for 200 years. So I'm not familiar with that whole history, but the Varnashram system has gradually become watered down and replaced really with modern social religious sensibilities, largely, even in India or in India. So gradual. What else? Anything else? Well, I guess we're out of time.
Just a quick question from Shraddha from Canada. She says, after rereading your Bhavanuvad on Tattva Sandarbha, I was looking for any more of your commentaries on the other Sandarbhas or any similar articles.
Yeah, I haven't written on the other Sandarbhas. But some of what I've taken from them and drawn upon them, I should say, in other books that I've written with reference to them. Have you read Sacred Preface? That might be a good one. Yes, okay, you can read it again. So I haven't written separately on Sandarbhas. If I do, maybe you'll be the first that I inform about that. Appreciate the interest. Thank you for the question. So we're out of time with that. Nice to
There's
talk.
one more question from Gayatri, but let's leave that for next week.
Okay, will do. Go with Premanandi. Hari Bol.
Thank you everybody for coming, and let's meet up next week again. Hari Bol.